Hello and welcome everyone to What's Next, the podcast where we dive a little deeper into life's bigger, scarier questions. Today I am joined by my good friend and brother Bishoy, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what happens when life throws us some curveballs. So Bishoy, thanks for joining me here today.
All right. Thank you so much, Rafi, for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, dude, this is fun.
So just like by way of background, I graduated college in 2013 with a bachelor's in biology.
Wow, biology.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And then I actually have two master's degrees.
Woo!
I have a master's in public health where I went to Drexel in Philly. I graduated in 2017. And then I have an MBA from the University of Minnesota where I graduated in 2021.
Wow.
And so I'm really excited to talk about the topic of like pivoting and change.
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of that in my life.
Yeah.
And so now I am a healthcare consultant. I run my own consulting company. It's relatively new. So again, I had to pivot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that we can talk about.
Wow.
And just
so two MBAs or two master's degrees rather.
Yeah.
And you started off in dental school?
Yes. So I do have technically 2.5 degrees.
Dang, man. It's a lot of school.
Besides my undergrad degree. So I'll get into that.
Okay.
And I think this has been like really foundational for my life, is that between first grade and 8th grade, I was in a new school every single year.
That's a lot of moving.
So I moved every single year.
That's a lot of change for a little guy.
Yeah.
Like, dang, dude. And first to 8th grade?
Yeah.
Every school.
Every year was a new school across 2 different countries.
Oh my God.
And I think like
countries?
4 states.
Okay, let's dive a little.
So there's a
little deeper into that. 2 countries and 4 states.
Yeah.
Over the span of 7 years?
Yeah, 7 or so years.
That's a lot of. So you got really good at like accepting change. Then I can assume.
I mean, it still becomes difficult for me.
Okay.
But I have the toolkit. Just put my head down, focus on what needs to get done, and just execute.
Yeah, you do have that personality of go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And so it's definitely been like a trademark where like something's new, something's different. There's a lot of uncertainty. Well, let's like lay out what's the playbook, what needs to get done. Like, and oftentimes it's like, let's set the emotions aside for now and like process this later, but focus on like the here and now.
Wow.
And of course, like I think one thing that has been recent over the past few years is like the importance of really involving God and trusting in God through that process.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You seem to have like gone through a lot of difficult changes over the years, so I can only imagine what that's like, especially growing up without like a baseline or a cornerstone, something to lean back on. That would be really difficult to go through and to experience without like some kind of a faith background or something to lean back on, you know?
Yeah, and so now it's become more of, let me understand how to lean on God and when to lean on God and how to lean on God. So that way, and like bring him into the process. Really just surrender my whole life to him and trust and have faith that things will work out.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anyone that like necessarily, like, I wish I learned that at a young age, and so that's why I'm thankful for the opportunity to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
And like dive deeper into it, because I wish that, especially like when I was in my late teens or early 20s, when there's so many new decisions and big decisions that are oftentimes what seems to be life-altering decisions have to be made. There's no understanding of how to go about making those decisions, or no sense of, well, what if I make the wrong decision? Like, can I pivot and like, what do I do from
change
there?
Course.
And change course. Yeah. So that's become like really important for me.
Yeah, I think growing up and going through school and with the societal pressures, the familial pressures, a lot of times these big decisions are kind of portrayed in a lens that they're make it or break it. Like they're an end
Yeah.
all be all. Like if this doesn't work out, it's the end of the world. It's the end of my life. Like
Right.
this is the end of the road. I don't know what I'm gonna do after this. But yeah, this is interesting because it sounds like you've come to this crossroads in life several times.
Yeah.
And you're still here, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I think one thing is like we tend to, at least for me, growing up, I tended to wrap my identity around a few core decisions, right? Around like career, around the type of person I want to be, the type of profession I want to have, the type of life I want to have. But I've discovered that your identity is far greater than just the sum of your decisions.
Wow.
And again, like it goes back to like being grounded in who you are as like a child of God.
Wow. Yeah, I need you to repeat that last part one more time. Your identity is much more than the sum of your decisions.
Yeah, I like, and I think I'm saying this now in March of 2025. I think a couple of years ago I would have told you something different, but I think now, from my experience, your identity is way more than just the sum of your individual decisions, whether big or small. I know that your identity is really grounded in being a child of God.
Wow.
And so therefore, if that becomes your primary identity, then all those other decisions become part of your secondary identity. And granted, they're still important.
I was just going to ask you,
But it just takes a little bit of that edge or that pressure off.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, which one do you put the most weight on in terms of importance? Your primary identity, your secondary identity, and how do you balance those? Like, I mean, like if you know, for example, if you know, okay, I know that I'm a daughter or a son of God, and that is who I am. But I also have to fit into the world somehow, right?
Right.
So how do you balance those two?
Yeah, and I think this is a continuous journey that I'm still learning. I think for me, I've learned, for example, so I graduated with a bachelor's in biology.
Yeah.
And I wanted to become a dentist.
Wow. So you like teeth. You like teeth.
So okay, but let me, so this is the thing, is like, let me walk through like how that decision was kind of made.
Okay, yeah. I'm interested.
My parents are physicians.
Okay.
There's so many different healthcare professionals in my family.
Okay.
And naturally I really liked and I was good at math and science.
It's an obvious choice.
And so I was like, okay, I want to do something that helps people, something in healthcare, because that also is where like you can do so many different mission trips and you're really impacting people's lives in a very vulnerable time. But I didn't want the grueling schooling that comes with being a doctor.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I looked around and I was like, dentists seem to have a clear path. And I knew I always liked business. And so I was like, I could also open up then multiple practices and own multiple practices. And that was kind of the vision that I had for myself.
Interesting. So you had that business mindset kind of from early on.
Yeah. Even when I was in middle school, I would like sell things to my friends in lunchtime and like make a little bit of money.
A little entrepreneur.
Yeah, but it didn't blossom until like much later. And so my identity then, once I got into dental school and I was in school for about 2 years.
Okay, so 2 years of dental school.
Yeah, and it's a 4-year program, and so I finished like 50% of it.
Wow, that's a pretty significant percentage.
Correct. And so as a result, like my identity was wrapped around, I am going to be a dentist. I'm going to be this person that helps people's teeth. And by the way, I also had braces, as I'm sure many of us did.
Sure.
And so that the impact of getting my teeth straightened in terms of like my confidence and in terms of like my identity, my personality, like made a big impact. And so that was also a huge reason that I picked dentistry.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Okay.
But then I discovered, I think, as we were finishing up like the textbook part of the program and entering into like actually seeing patients.
Oh boy.
That I just wasn't good at it.
Oh, okay. Just wasn't something that came naturally to you.
No,
that you enjoyed.
No, it wasn't. I enjoyed it at first, but then when you have to put in, and so there was like, you had to practice on these mannequins.
Oh, nice.
And so what would take my colleague, for example, like, let's say 2 hours to do, it would literally take me like 4.5, 5 hours to do.
Oh, wow.
And so I just realized I was picking up that I just wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
You give me like some textbook thing to memorize. Oh, I got it down. But when it came to like the hand skills, that was not my strength. And so I decided, like, the end of that second year, I was like, I need to find something different. I would love to quit this program. But obviously I've spent now 6 years of my life like on this journey. There's expectations, there's parental expectations.
Yep.
There's cultural expectations.
Yep.
And there's my expectations for myself.
Yeah.
So I was like,
especially after you've invested so much time of your own life.
Correct.
Like,
and so it's like, if that were to be taken away from me, like, who would I become? Right? Like, what would I do?
Whoa.
And so that's a scary
question.
Ties into like the identity piece of it.
Yeah.
And so by God's grace, I ended up not doing too well on a couple of classes. And instead of just having me like repeat the year, they actually requested that I leave the program altogether.
Oh my God.
And so it was like a very, very challenging summer. And I obviously didn't know what to do with my life, and all of those questions that I just talked about.
Yeah.
A few minutes ago, like, came back to the surface.
So I have a quick question for you then. Obviously we've talked about like parental expectations, societal, cultural, like all of these expectations. So when you're in that position where the school's basically asked you to leave nicely, I can only imagine like what your parents were thinking or saying or how they reacted. So my question to you is, given their reaction, well, I guess I'd like to know what their reaction was, because I'm just making an assumption at this point. Maybe it's a wrong assumption. I don't know. How did you navigate that? Because obviously, like, our parents, our families are huge, at least in our culture. Like, it's a big thing. Like, you know, we want their approval. We want to make them proud. You know, we want them to be, you know, encouraging of our decisions. Yeah, so when we make a decision that's maybe not so in line with their vision of our life, you know, like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So I think part of the thing that gave me a lot of comfort was I put in 120% of my effort into the program.
You gave it your best.
I gave it like a full faith effort. So I left it all on the table. I had no regrets. So when they essentially, like, when they kicked me out, there was nothing that I could have done more in that sense.
So did your parents see it that way?
Yeah, so they saw it that way because I happened to be living at home at the time.
Oh, okay.
And I was literally at school 16, 17 hours a day.
Sounds about right.
So they saw the amount of work that I put in.
Yeah.
But in terms of their reaction, I think they just didn't know how to react. They showed me a ton of love and support. And they were trying to help me brainstorm, like, what do you do next? And also keep in mind that, like, parents tend to be, my parents, because they moved from Egypt, and even me at the time, I was only aware of a few select professions.
Sure.
And so the profession the job that I have now, and the stuff that I do now, was something that I would definitely did not know 10, 15 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And so they were brainstorming other healthcare profession, grad schools, right? Like pharmacy, PA, whatever it might be. But for some reason, I remember I had within that summer, so it was like around May, between May and June, I had such clarity that I think only came because it was directly from God, and that I think I like within a week I was like, okay, I really want to pursue a dual master's degree in both public health and an MBA because I really care about healthcare, but I really wanted to focus on like the business side.
Yeah.
Now, I had never done research about an MPH before. I couldn't tell you what kind of jobs I wanted to have in the future. But I just knew those were the 2 degrees that I wanted. And so when I look back, and I did not even notice this at the time.
Yeah.
But when I look back, like it was a gift from God that I was able to identify that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so within a couple of weeks, I took the GMAT to get into a master's in public health program. I applied to a few programs.
Wow.
And then I got into a program in Drexel. And so in a matter of 2.5 months, I ended up getting in and moving to Philly.
Dang, dude. Another big change.
And then when I look, it was just a change. But like when I look back on it, it was like, oh, this is it doesn't seem like a big deal now. But at the time it was life changing for me.
Yeah. So I I didn't necessarily have like a big shift in my like education or career, but I did have a big challenge, and I had to balance parental expectations. Because actually that shift was kind of being pressured on me from my parents. So it was a little different. So when I started, so I obviously pursued engineering, which funnily enough, I picked for myself. So I didn't get pressured into it.
Yeah.
not directly at least. So I picked my career kind of on my own. I kind of knew what I wanted to do by middle school, and I pursued it from there. But it turns out that I was really bad at school when I entered college. Like in high school, breeze. Like I slept through high school, got straight A's, easy. College, not so much. College was a whole different story.
Yeah, of course.
First semester, got 2 D's.
Oh, wow.
Calculus, physics. I had a GPA of a 1.8.
Wow.
A 1.8, yeah. 1.8. Got put on academic probation. So the school was basically like, hey, we'll give you another chance, but if you don't turn this around, we're going to have to ask you to leave as well, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Obviously I was on scholarship, and it was a mess. A big mess. Because if I didn't get my grades up fast, I was out of there. I was out of there, and there was no way back in.
Right.
And like, I remember coming home that first semester, and then I bring obviously you can't hide that you have a 1.3 or what a 1.8 GPA, and you can't hide the fact that you've gotten, a big request from the school to like back out.
Yeah.
So like had some conversations with my dad, and my dad and I are really close, and he was kind of my mentor, my guide.
Yeah.
But obviously with that came a lot of pressure.
Sure.
So he was like, maybe engineering isn't for you. Maybe you should consider a different path, like go into business or something. I'm sitting here like, I don't know anything about, I don't care about business,
Yeah.
but there was that pressure for a solid I'll say until I graduated. Until I graduated, like it was kind of a fight to stay in engineering.
Yeah.
But I kind of put my foot down and I was like, no, this is what I want.
Yeah.
And I put in the work. Not to say that the first semester I didn't put in the work. I was grinding it out. I was just really, really bad at taking exams, and I was really bad at studying because I didn't know how to do any of that.
Yeah, I mean, no one prepares you to go from high school to college.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly.
It's a huge change.
Yeah. So I just kind of, put in the work, put in the time, just grinded.
And even as you were getting I'm sure you second semester, third semester, you were getting much better grades.
Yeah, I mean, I retook Calc.
It was still that tension.
Yeah, that tension kind of remained.
Interesting.
That tension kind of remained for the remainder of my college career because it was like, okay, well, once I started getting to my major classes, my aero classes, like, oh my God, like it made Calc 1 and Physics 1 look like child's play.
Yeah.
Like it was intense.
You probably had the tools, like the toolkit to be able to navigate those.
By then, yes, it was a lot better. So, but I guess like my point is, even though I had that pressure, that pushback to kind of change, move, pivot, I had chosen a direction, and I was pretty adamant about getting through it. And it ended up taking me 5 years instead of 4, but I got through it. By the end of it, I think my dad was really happy. I think my family was really happy. I was like really happy to get through it. And honestly, like I enjoyed what I learned, and it was definitely my thing. It was definitely what I enjoyed doing. But sometimes you kind of have to, push through.
Yeah, I think I think it's a very delicate balance.
It is.
I think parents, most parents always want the best for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have an idea of what that looks like.
Sure.
And a lot of times what we have in mind just looks different. And so it's just a matter of multiple conversations I think that you have to have. Like I remember like my parents were trying to give me all sorts of different advice. And I just wanted something different. And actually I'm thankful now because my parents really don't even know what I do. And that makes it
so funny.
That makes it great because it's funny, but it also makes it great because there's no like interference at all. And so even like when I got laid off in October for my job that I've been at for 6 years, like they were trying to offer me advice in terms of, apply for jobs, apply for this job, talk to this person.
Sure.
But I like knew what I needed to do.
Sometimes that's all that you need.
And I'm also like a lot older now, so I like kind of knew again like what that playbook is. So I dusted off the old let's like navigate change playbook and just executed. And it worked out.
That's amazing. I mean, it's honestly inspiring that you were able to create a playbook for yourself from all of the experiences in life that you've had to go through, and you're able to kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, as they say, and find a new direction forward. Even if that wasn't like it wasn't a clear path paved by anyone, it was kind of a path that you had to pave for yourself.
Yeah, and so I think this is a great segue into just talking more about like being rooted in the faith.
Yeah.
I think previous times when I've had to pivot and change, I've kind of had to do it by myself, or I felt like I've had to do it by myself. But this time around, the end of last year, I decided to take a different approach and really like lay my struggles like at the feet of God and just be like, look, like I don't know what it is that I want. I keep on applying for jobs and not getting any. And I think through first of all, that time of like prayer and like just that my spiritual discipline, really
Yeah.
gave me so much comfort that I've never experienced like any other time in my life.
Wow. Okay. Sounds like that's a practical, like if you had to break it down, that sounds like step one of practical of the practical steps. Figure out your spiritual discipline, like your spiritual life is really important. So figure out how to go about your spiritual life.
And I think the biggest thing here, like just to put it simply, is whether you have whether you're in college and you're trying to make a big decision, or you're in grad school, or you have a job and you're trying to make whatever big decision you have. Oftentimes we put the decision responsibility on ourselves, and we feel like we're carrying that burden by ourselves.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered is, like, instead of saying, "Oh, I have a big problem, like let me take it to God," why don't you switch it and say, "Oh, my God is the maker of the universe. Like, that problem is really small compared to who he is. So he's just going to take care of it."
Big time.
And so if you just focus on your relationship with God, then everything else will kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
But that's so counter culture. That's so counter
it is
society.
Yeah, it is.
And just like the way that we tend to grow up.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. And I think that kind of applies to any issue you end up having in life.
Oh, correct.
Big or small. Even if you have no issues, like he's at the, he's the creator of the universe.
Correct.
And there's that verse, I'll have to pull it up because I can't remember it. Maybe you remember it. But if he can take care of the birds and give them their daily bread, don't you think he's gonna take care of you? Like, why do you need to worry about what you're gonna wear or what you're gonna eat? Or
exactly.
You're so much more important in his eyes. You're so much like more what's the word? You're just worth so much more.
We're a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like this whole concept, which I've had for many years and only recently have been changing, is like we just have no concept of how much God loves us.
Yeah, I think that's such a hard thing to wrap your head around.
And like obviously, like we're both married, we have parents, we have amazing friends.
Yeah.
But like the love that God has for us is unfathomable. And so therefore, like if I have a problem at work, or if I get laid off, or a problem with grad school, I just think it's the end of the world for often like my life. Like, how am I gonna afford rent next week, or how am I gonna be able to like do these things, like live the life that I want for myself?
Right.
But realistically, like if you just put it all at the feet of God and like focus on that relationship, then it not only gives you that peace that you so desire, but it also this problem will get solved. You just don't know necessarily how, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be in your control.
Sometimes you just have to let go and let God.
Correct. It's as simple as that. And so I always think it's like, I've been reading a lot like in Acts. I just finished it a few weeks ago, and so many times like you see St. Paul like going from place to place, like without a care at all, and it's just like
just full trust in God.
Correct. 100% surrender to God. Like how can we live like that kind of life? Or then like, I mean, you can take so many different examples from the Bible, or like modern day saints, or like even Pope Kyrillos.
Yeah.
Whose feast day is today.
Right. Yeah.
Like anytime there was an issue, it wasn't like, oh, let me call up this person and let me like try to figure it out by myself. No, it was like, let me just go take it to the altar and like I'll pray a liturgy and it'll get resolved. I don't know how, but it will.
Yeah. You always take your problems and you lay them at the feet of Christ, and you trust him and his infinite love and infinite wisdom and knowledge to get you through it.
Right. And so that's why like it's really important to have that spiritual rule.
Yeah.
In like the good, the peaceful times. So then when you're actually under that stress, you have that playbook. You're like, oh, already have a relationship with God. Let me just take this to my like the one that I love.
Yeah.
Instead of all of a sudden you're like, oh, who's God? Like, where's God?
Now you got to figure that out for that, and then that's such like a huge thing to tackle, like a huge question to try to start answering when you're like already trying to figure out 110 other things.
Yeah. And so that's why for me, I found like my relationship with God is always the strongest when I'm really under a ton of pressure.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I think naturally we kind of tend to, even if you do have that like strong like spiritual rule, or spiritual discipline, even so, I feel like when things are tough, that's when we tend to lean more on him and lean less on ourselves.
Yeah.
But if, like you're saying, if we're able to always lean on him,
correct,
good times and bad times, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it just like that's probably from a change. Obviously, like we can go into some of the practical things in terms of playbook for how to navigate change, what to think about, what to do. But I think first and foremost, like everything starts and ends with a strong relationship with God.
Yeah, it's the cornerstone of everything. You don't have that, you can't build. Right. You can't build up. Okay. So step one, strong relationship with God, strong spiritual discipline and rule, and then you can actually start the process of navigating change.
I think the other thing is like you really have to have a group of close friends or family, like a very strong support system.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like those are the people that you live with and you like are part of your family. But oftentimes you just need other friends that are maybe in your own academic circle or own work circle.
Sure. Someone that's kind of in the same environment and understands like what you're going through a little bit more intimately. Yeah.
And so that's just that combination for you to be able to like vent to and lean on. That way you're not just isolated by yourself. And so even when I was, for example, moving from Minnesota to DC, that was another shift that was big that I did in the past. It was like in the past 5 years or so.
Yeah, that's when we met.
Sorry, what?
That's when we met.
Yes, exactly. That is how. So it was about 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
That was like a new time, but I leaned on like my family at the time. I leaned on some of my closest friends here to be able to just say like this is the right decision.
Sure.
Let's like weigh out the pros and cons. And so that's probably the third thing. Is I always make pros and cons list.
Oh, okay. A pros and cons list. I like a good pros and cons list.
And so you think it's like naive or like simple. It's actually very effective. And so it could be from as simple as like, oh, which car to buy, right? Because that's oftentimes a big decision.
Yeah.
So like, do I take this job or stay at my other job?
Yeah, I actually did that when I got about 2 years ago I was looking for a job and I got 2 job offers.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out, okay, well, which one should I go to? Which one should I accept? Started out with a pros and cons list.
It's a tried and true method, and I use it for small decisions, but also for really big decisions.
It simplifies things and makes, like, if you're a visual person, especially, and you write it down. I'm a visual person. Yeah, that just having it written down and you can kind of physically see, okay, if I have 2 options, 3 options, 10 options, and I can see like all the things that are good or bad about each option. It's like what's it called? A tournament. You know, when you have like a tournament, like a bracket, you can start like knocking some some options out, and then you narrow it down to like 2, and then or however many, and yeah, it works.
Now the one thing I have noticed, especially like if you're thinking about switching jobs, for example, is that oftentimes one item on like the con list is not the same weight as one item on the pro list, right? Like for example,
yes, very true actually.
If I'm leaving a job, I have really good relationships. I'm assuming I have really good relationships at my current job.
Sure.
So I can't quantify that, even if the other one might, let's say, like pay me more or might have better quality of life. So that's when you have to use some judgment to figure out like what is that worth to you.
Right. It's not purely like mathematical or scientific.
It's a science. It's an art. The other thing though is, I think at the end of the day, we place so much emphasis on certain decisions in our life. And what I found is at the end of the day, and I'm going to take a page out of Jeff Bezos' book. He has, when they're thinking about decisions at Amazon, there's decisions that are 2-door decisions or 1-door decisions.
Okay, can you explain a little bit more about?
A 2-door decision is a decision where if you make it, you can always go back. Or you can always...
It's like a reversible decision.
Yeah, it's a reversible decision. And if you really think about it, almost every decision we make in life is a reversible decision.
Yeah.
There's very, very, very few 1-door decisions where you can't reverse it.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about that, to be honest. That never crossed my mind.
Yeah, so it kind of takes off a lot of that pressure then. I mean, even like when we bought a house.
Yeah.
Like that, a lot of times that seems like a 1-door decision, but in reality, that's a 2-door decision.
That makes me feel better.
You might like lose money or you might like, it might not work out as optimal as you would consider or as you would hope.
Yeah.
But you can still reverse it.
That's comforting.
And so therefore, like the same thing with grad programs. Like I've been through a lot of them. And even people who finish grad programs, like I know a ton of people who go through med school or go through pharmacy school or whatever it might be.
Sure.
And then they decide, oh, but I want to see patients, but I also want to like start a company, or I also want to like be in technology, or also want to do this or that.
Yeah.
You can pivot, but it just might take a little bit of thought and intentionality and support from others, but it's not a 1-door decision. You're not stuck, for example, seeing patients for the rest of your life.
I think that takes the pressure off a little bit.
Oh, correct. And so I've seen, it's really interesting to see people who are like engineers or who are doctors or who are whatever they might be.
Yeah.
Who have then pivoted into like something completely different.
That's so true, actually.
And oftentimes it gives them a lot more fulfillment. And so it is what it is, right? Like if you want to pursue, like, as long as like certain things work out, probably like, let's say like your student loans.
Sure.
But then like you have to think about what can I do to pay off my student loans and then still pursue what I want to do. Like you could be like an interior designer, but have a background in like be a doctor also, right? So maybe you do 50-50 and then over time you pivot over time. Like it doesn't have to be instantaneous. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty big. And I think, like you said, having that mindset that you can kind of change at any point and it's not the end of the world, that takes the pressure off.
Yeah,
big time.
And so the other thing that I just want to make very clear, because I've been hearing this a lot, is like in moments of uncertainty, oftentimes we feel like we're alone, or like we don't know, like, is it going to work out? Like it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. But again, that goes back to trusting in God, having a strong support system, and I think doing your due diligence, whatever that means in that situation.
Yeah, I completely 1,000,000% agree. Even when I was in my first semester freshman year, and I was like basically flunking out. Something deep down inside, and obviously like my spiritual life back then was much different than it is now, but it was still there. It just looked different. But like deep down, I knew that God wasn't going to just leave me. He wasn't just going to let me go. And I knew that he was going to help me get through this. I just had to do my part. And my part was study really hard. Yeah. Grind it out. Have no social life. Like make a bunch of sacrifices. Have a bunch of nightmares. But he wasn't going to leave me. And I felt that. I knew that deep down. And that's why I like continued on. And obviously like I had a good support system as well. I had good friends in the same program as I was, going through the same thing. Misery loves company sort of deal. We were all miserable. So it was kind of comforting. But we all pushed through, and I pushed through with that faith and that knowledge and that belief that, God wasn't going to just let go and leave me.
And so that's why it reminds me of like the story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, where it's like there were 5,000 men. So if you think if they brought their families, it's about like 15 to 20,000 people.
Ooh,
and
that's a lot of people.
They're in the wilderness. There's no food, and the disciples are kind of like freaking out. They're just like, how are we going to feed these people? Like, why don't you just send them home? Yeah. They've been following you for a few days. Like they got to go eat somewhere. Like we won't be able to do this.
No.
And instead of being like, okay, well, we can just end it and tell them to go home, Christ is like, oh, well, what can you do? Like, what can you bring?
What do you bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? Like, bring what you can to the table and let me do the rest. That kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the flip side of that is like, once it's done, I think journaling is such an important practice, especially during difficult times. And so that way you can keep those memories. So the next time you go through something, you look back and you're like, oh, well, God helped me this time a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So God's going to help me here. And like we see that in like the crossing of the Jordan River in the Old Testament, where God tells them to like take stones from the river. And so that way they can like show their sons and their kids and their grandkids that, oh, God helped them cross the Jordan River. So then God's going to help them again. Yeah, and that's been like, when I look back on some of the things, I just started to do this recently.
Okay. Yeah.
When I look back on some of the things I've written, it's actually hilarious to see how stressed out I was about things. And then, they ended up being totally fine. They actually ended up being much better than I expected any sort of outcome to be. And it reminds me of the verse in the Bible that says that Christ came to give us like an abundant life. Like, I really hold on to that.
Yeah.
Because it's not like we tend to play like really small, like, oh, I want this job, or I want this, like, whatever it might be. But like the plans that God has for us is far beyond our thoughts and understanding, and even our desires.
Yeah. So our last episode, actually, we talked a little bit about journaling as well.
Oh, okay.
So that came up. So I 100% agree with you. Journaling is such a great way. It's like, you're writing your own history book, and when history inevitably repeats itself, you have a way of going back and, looking at, well, what happened in the past, right? And it's also interesting to see on the flip side how faithful God is with us.
Oh, absolutely.
You look back at, a couple years worth of struggles and a couple years worth of journaling, and you see that God hasn't ever left you. God has never abandoned you. He's always answered your prayers. Maybe it didn't always look the way you had in mind, but they got answered regardless, right? But that kind of leads me into another idea. So a few years ago, I heard this I heard this sermon. It was part of the grads retreat sermon. Verena had sent it to me. And I can't remember which Abuna was talking. Forgive me. But he was basically talking about how, like, in our minds, God micromanages every little decision we make. What school do I go to? What degree do I get? What job do I work? Who do I marry? What do I do with my life? Like, he's not micromanaging. He's there and he works with the options that we have. But he's not micromanaging every decision. And every decision that you make isn't the end of the world. Like, we're so focused on not making the incorrect or the wrong decision because we feel like, oh my God, if I make the wrong choice, then it's the end. It's over. My life is over.
Yeah.
That's not really how it works. That's not really how God works. I'll have to dig up the sermon and
yeah. So this is so I've been thinking a lot about this topic. I think I agree with you. That's not how God works. God gives us our free will to be able to live the life that we want, how we want.
Sure.
But at the same time, because we have free will, like I really believe that it's our responsibility to then bring those decisions, especially some of those key decisions, to Him. That way He can guide us.
Oh, 100%.
And this comes back to like surrendering it to Him. And the best part about it, though, that I think is so cool, is even if we make a bad decision, God can use that after the fact,
right?
In a good way.
That was also mentioned in the sermon, and I found that very comforting. But yes, no, I completely agree with you that we bring our decisions and we bring our choices to Him to help, so He can help guide us. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you study, engineering, or if you study biology, it's not the end of the world. Like, God does not care what you study. He'll help you get through whatever you decide to study.
Yeah.
But He's not, like, just because you chose to be an accountant instead of a doctor, like, it's not the end of the world. And I think that was kind of the point of that sermon, And
I think there's two things that come to mind. One is, in my opinion, there is one really, really, really important decision that we all have to make. And I think this is the one that is like might be the most important decision you have to make in your whole life. And that's who you marry.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. That's one of those one-door decisions most of the time. There's no backing out of that one.
I just can't. I think who you marry determines so much about then what your life looks like afterward. And what your relationship with God looks like, what your house looks like, what your contentment in life looks like. And so I think that's probably the number one decision you have to make. And obviously, like, not just by yourself, but like in prayer and surrendering it to God. But I think that's like the key decision that underscores so many other things in your life.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, that's one of those big decisions that you really do have to leave at the foot of Christ and ask for his guidance and wisdom and discernment.
Yeah.
It's not a decision you'd make haphazardly. And I don't think that was kind of the idea behind that sermon either. I think I think it was more like, sometimes people get nitpicky and they're not looking at the big picture, and God's looking at the big picture.
Correct. Oftentimes I've found it's really important for us to just zoom out.
Yeah.
Like, we're so much obviously in the detail day to day.
Yeah.
But like, and I know you love planes. Like, when you're on a plane, like that person on whatever street it might be looks almost negligible, like a bunch of ants.
Yeah.
And so that's like how, like, that's actually putting it into perspective.
Oh yeah.
And so even like, and that's at an airplane level. When you zoom out even further, like if you think about it in terms of like the universe,
Oh yeah.
And what small part Earth plays in the entire galaxy and universe, and how small you are on Earth, like really puts things
Yeah.
into perspective. So it's just going back to like those practical steps
Yeah.
that we had talked about. So number one was relying on God and that
Right.
spiritual rule. Number two was that support system.
Right.
Number three was the pros and cons list.
Right. Right.
I think those are like the foundational three things. I think from there it then depends on what is the thing in question, or what is the struggle that you have.
Okay.
And each one will have its own kind of like path, right? So if I'm
Sure.
trying to figure out what should my major be, that involves a ton of research. And so I think
Right.
for actually maybe the fourth one is you have to do your research.
Do
Whether
your
like I'm
homework.
researching like my major, researching jobs, and jobs are weird places, like job interviews,
Yeah.
because you get such like a small glimpse into the company.
Yeah.
And maybe like a couple of hours. But the company is made up of so much more. Like you can't tangibly understand the culture of the company just in a couple of conversations.
No, not at all.
Or like your manager, for example, like how they operate. And so we can get into like that
Oh yeah.
component, but it involves like just a lot of research.
Yes.
If you're moving from one place to another, that involves research. If you're buying
Very
a
true.
house, so I think that fourth level, and maybe it complements that pros and cons list, is making sure you do your due diligence and really understand, does this decision tie back to my values? Which also means like you have to know what your values are.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to start. If you don't know, that's probably a good place to start before you start tackling a big change.
Yeah, and so that's why like when people think about their major, for example, like a lot of times the focus is on, okay, well, I want to live a good life. I want to make an impact. I want to help people. But then like, okay, why this profession over that profession? And is it based on just like the external? You see certain people in certain professions are driving certain cars or wear certain clothes, and it's all like externalities and external factors? Or is it because something more intrinsic, or something that's at a deeper level? And we just live in a world nowadays where there's nothing that's enough, right? And so I've been thinking a lot lately about like,
not at all.
What is enough?
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Yeah, no, I mean, Myrna and I have had these conversations as well about like consumerism, especially. It's like,
oh yeah,
it's so bad. We always want more. We always want more. We're always spending more. But like, why? Like, what? To what end?
Correct. So, to what end, and like, what is ultimately the goal? And so, like, Abuna Elijah always brings this up, is like this concept of the hedonic treadmill, where you're on a treadmill. Okay, you've reached the goal that you've set, but like the pleasure, the satisfaction from it lasts such a short amount of time. And now you're like, okay, what's the next goal?
Yeah.
And it's like a very dangerous thing to just a dangerous cycle to be on.
I agree. And that's something that I started thinking about actually in like high school, right before college. And then,
oh wow,
yeah, it's this concept of, okay, well, I think especially here, like our society is constantly pushing us to figure out what's next in our lives. What's the next goal that we're going to accomplish? Which is ironic. Yeah.
No, what's the next goal?
Yeah.
What's the next job? When are you going to get married?
Exactly.
When are you going to have a child? It never stops.
Yeah. It's this like a continuous like timeline or outline of what your life should look like.
Oftentimes, this is just as an aside, as a joke. Oftentimes, I don't be like, when am I gonna die? Right? Like that's just like the next.
I guess that's the next step, isn't it? Yeah.
Like I think there's something about enjoying the present that we just have a very difficult time in society doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think, especially if you're kind of at the start of all of the start of life, you know, like you're just about to graduate high school. One thing that I've come to appreciate is slowing down and just appreciating and acknowledging my accomplishments up to that point. I'm not thinking about the next steps. I'm not thinking about the next challenge. I'm not thinking about what's coming next. All I'm thinking about is I put in all this work, put in all this effort. I've come from point A to point B in a journey. And it's time for me to just internalize that and appreciate that. And taking some time to do that and then moving on to the next challenge, because there's always going to be a next challenge. There's always going to be a next obstacle. That then you can kind of start fresh. We don't take enough time to just slow down and appreciate, like, wow, you just graduated high school or you just graduated college. Like that's a big thing. You just spent like 4+ years of your life grinding and studying, and you know, who knows, like that's a big accomplishment. That should not go like under the rug, like swept under the rug and you know, on to the next thing. No, like you should take some time to really sit and appreciate what you've accomplished.
Yeah, and I even noticed this, like when you move from one job to another, hopefully you get like a pay increase. Oftentimes we don't sit and bask in like the fulfillment, in like being happy that I got this new job.
Yeah.
As soon as I get it, at least for me, when I was a little bit younger, I'd be like, as soon as I got into the new job, I'd be like, okay, like when am I gonna get promoted?
Oh,
It's
wow.
like, oh, like why don't you just take it easy? Like,
Yeah.
enjoy the journey. It's not about the destination.
Exactly. But once you get to the destination, it's nice to sit back and like appreciate how far you've come as well.
Yeah, well,
appreciate the journey. Like,
correct.
Take some time
but there's
to
no need to
appreciate
add
it.
like a new destination.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think the like doing that research and really identifying what your core values are,
Yeah.
and how it aligns with that decision, I think will help you. I mean, it would have helped me figure out what's important for me. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And also I've discovered like we have a lot of latent interests that might not bloom until later in life. And so at least that's how it was for me. For some people, like I know some people that are like they've had the same interests for like 20-25 years.
Wow.
But we also like change a lot.
We do.
Especially as we're growing up.
Oh yeah.
And so for me, like I didn't realize how much I enjoyed like as I was saying earlier, like there were some hints of me being an entrepreneur at a young age, but it didn't really like bloom until shortly after dental school, and even like that last year of dental school. And so it was interesting to see like, oh, it was there all along. It just took a back seat to my love for science.
Oh yeah.
And so that's something that's also really important, is to figure out like why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then it's really like if you're making a big decision, especially around like major or career, like figuring out what are my interests, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and play your strengths.
Yeah, definitely. And be flexible to change as well.
Correct.
Be open to it.
So this is really interesting. The flexibility component is so important. Like let's say I want to be an engineer, or let's say I want to work in finance.
Sure.
It's one thing if I say, and I'll use finance because I know that area a bit more. It's one thing to say, okay, I want to work at a startup that's focused, that makes a big impact, than to say, for example, I want to work at Facebook, um, in like this type of role, right? Then you're almost setting yourself up for failure because there's not that many. There's only a few roles maybe open at that one company.
Yeah.
Whereas if you open the aperture a little bit and be a little bit flexible,
Yeah.
you'll probably reach your goal a little bit easier.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, being flexible and open to different things. You'd be surprised what you'd find, what you'd learn, what you'd you might find something that you actually enjoy and you never would have known if you hadn't been flexible enough to explore an opportunity.
Correct. Yeah. I think those, like, and then of course, like, for me, everything has to have a plan.
Okay.
And so I think that comes to that, like, the fifth component
Okay.
is just for everything, like, okay, play this out. Like, whether I have a job, like, let's say you get this job.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Like, what are the skills that you want to learn in this job? Is this a new industry that you want to gain from? Like, play this out a little bit further along to see what's the end result, because it'll actually tell you a lot about yourself and why you want to do this. If you're moving to a new city, play this out. Like, is the church, what does the church look like there?
Yeah.
What is the church? What does the youth community look like?
Right.
What does this city even look like? Like, is there a lot of, like, what's the food? Like, for me, I love food, so it's like, what's the food scene?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Like, you have to, like, plan it out, and that's part of the research. But then also, like, figure out logistically, like, how are you going to get from here to there? Do I need to start to network? Do I need to start to pack up my boxes and get a moving truck? Do I need to start figuring out, like, especially like around interviews, answering the question of, like, what's your salary expectations?
Oh yeah.
Tends to be like a very difficult question.
I hate that question.
But I actually enjoy it because I know exactly how much
Wow.
I should be earning.
I hate it because I don't like it because, like, it's so different from company to company, especially when you start looking at, like, the
Sure,
benefits package and this and that. But yeah, I mean, like, I think I also have a rough idea of how much I should be making, but I still hate that question. It's my least favorite question.
And so those are the things, like, I have whenever I go to interviews. For example, I have like a Notion page. It just has, here's like the 5 questions that they're most likely going to ask.
Yeah.
And I'm just prepared for it. When we moved from Minneapolis to DC, I had all this information laid out, like moving truck, when it would get there, when it would leave, what's going in it.
Wow, you're very organized.
Because we drove like 24 hours.
Oh my goodness.
We were like, here, like, map that out. So we ended up stopping like in Detroit to see Mary's family. And then we drove down. So, like, we like made a few pit stops along the way in very strategic locations. Yeah,
very, very well planned out. So that's like
the very planned out.
Yeah, very, very well planned out.
It was not like let's just hit the road and see where we go. No, that's not my personality. But hey, that works for some people.
That's kind of my personality. But, like, it's kind of my personality. But at the same time, like, when I got a job offer from the Navy when I first graduated college, I spent a lot of time figuring out, okay, well, obviously this place was in the middle of nowhere in Maryland. But I wanted to know, like, what am I getting myself into? Yeah. What does this place look like? I never been to Maryland before in my life, so I don't know anything about it. So I actually asked them if they could, like, and this was during COVID, so it was very strange time. But I asked them, okay, well, I'd like to come see the base. Can you fly me out? And they did.
Wow.
So I flew into Baltimore. I drove from Baltimore down to absolutely nowhere. Solid 2 hours. I toured the base. I got to meet the hiring manager, my supervisor, my would be supervisor. Got to chat with them. Got a tour of not just the office, but also like the city, the town.
Yeah.
And then I made my decision. But I made that decision for other reasons. Like at the time, I didn't have any other job offers, so I was like, well,
Sure.
I guess I'm going to Maryland. Even though I wasn't like a huge fan of the area, but
sure.
Even when I applied to these other jobs that were up here in Virginia, I did the same thing. I was like, okay, well, I want to know what I'm getting myself into. Can I have a site visit? And yeah, I went to see both offices, met with both managers, met with both teams that I'd be working with as well. And that did kind of put a perspective on like what this place looks like. And it helped me make that decision as well.
Right.
So.
And then I think like I talked to a lot of people who grew up in one city and have never moved and are now contemplating leaving, or they are about to get married and they're moving to a new place, or job is taking them somewhere else. And oftentimes they're nervous, which I mean, totally understand that.
Yeah.
And so it's made me reflect on how resilient we are. Oftentimes, like when you've never been in that position, you don't know how you're gonna react.
Not at all.
But it's gonna be fine. And I'm sure it was like with you. Like,
oh yeah,
when you were in Maryland, it ended up all working out.
Yeah, it did. It did. I mean, thank God, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I was terrified of leaving Texas. I remember the night we like packed up the trailer and got ready to hit the road. Like that was such a mixture of emotions.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I was ready for it. But sometimes you just got to do what you got to do and take a leap of faith and move forward. And that's exactly what I did. And fast forward, it's been 5 years now since I was in Texas.
Yeah.
And like, thank God, couldn't be happier. You know, I mean, obviously I miss Texas, but I also, you know, I've grown to love where I'm at now too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, it was the same for me when I moved from Minnesota to DC, or like to Northern Virginia. I had a couple of friends here, but I just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And it's been almost 4 years and could not be happier about the decision.
Yeah.
I think there's actually one time where my very first job out of grad school, I like was switching jobs because it was a much better job offer, and I was pivoting from data analysis to more like strategy and finance.
Okay.
And I remember I actually like cried giving the resignation letter to my manager.
Wow.
Because I loved that place. It was like,
wow.
I felt like I had it like made, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to have another job that's like this, with like a nice team like this, with a nice manager. And I was only there for a year and a half, and so it was like surprising how strong of a bond I formed. And I always reflect on the fact that, okay, like I shed a couple of tears when I was giving my manager that letter.
Yeah.
But every subsequent job I've had after that has been actually better than that job.
That's so funny. Yeah, sometimes our expectations or like we only know what we've experienced. There's no way for us to know anything outside of that. And so if we're not open to having those new experiences, like how do we know? And there is probably very likely something better out there. You just never know until you take that step and run with it, you know?
Correct. And so like I think like life will surprise you with how amazing things turn out to be. But it's only once you step outside of your comfort zone that you'll both grow and learn to enjoy new things.
Yeah. And I mean, change is always scary, and taking a leap of faith is always a very scary thing to do as well. But again, I think some of the things that are comforting to know going into those potential changes or leaps of faith is it's not the end of the world, and most decisions are reversible in some way, shape, or form. And, if you're bringing what you have to Christ and you're letting him do the rest, you do your part, he does his part, everything's going to be fine at the end of the day.
Yeah. And you made it sound so easy.
Yeah, no, I watered it down.
But I think that's the thing. Like, we haven't talked about like the managing your own emotions.
True.
And I think like when you're in that situation, there's just so many different emotions of uncertainty, like this distress, like like lack of sleep, and so that's like the difficult part. And I don't know how I was able to do this, but for me, like I literally, like I'm able to just set the emotions aside and not process them until after the fact.
Oh wow. that's
Which is probably
very
not
unique.
healthy.
I mean, it's unique. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, so I couldn't tell you if it's healthy or not. I probably do similar things. Yeah, I actually, looking back, I probably did the exact same thing, especially when I moved from Texas. I had so many crazy emotions, but I knew that I didn't have a choice, so I had to go through with this. And so I took that leap of faith. And it wasn't until later, like after the move, that I was able to sit with my feelings and process.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna ask, was like, when did you process those emotions?
I think it came in several different ways. It definitely came after the fact, after I had made the move. And obviously, like with such a big move comes so many different changes. It kind of keeps your mind occupied. So like I wasn't able to sit down and process right away. But I was able to, and this goes back to like some decisions are reversible in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I was able to go back and visit Texas, and I used to go back like every 3 months, and I'd stay for a month, and it was like I never left. So that kind of helped me process some of the emotions. And in some ways, that was kind of reversing the decision to leave, because I was able to go home. I was able to see friends and family and spend time with all the people that I loved and missed. So that helped me kind of work through it. Sometimes it takes time. It's not always instant. Again, not sure if that's necessarily healthy, but we'll definitely be talking about that on another episode. We got some actual psychologists, so they can kind of guide us through that.
Yeah, and I think now that I think about it, like so when I was in Buffalo, I lived in the same house for about 11 years.
Okay.
And then once I moved to Philly, my parents actually left as well. And so
wow,
we ended up selling that like childhood home. And it was like difficult to then go back to Buffalo and be like, oh, this place that I used to call home is actually like no longer home because my parents no longer live in this city.
Makes sense.
And so it was like, that was, for example, difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think it takes like a long time. Oftentimes it takes a long time to process your emotions. And I think for me, I continue to learn new things about myself.
Oh, yeah.
And process them in like different dimensions, if you will.
Interesting. Very interesting.
But at the end of the day, I think, regardless of what the change is, if you prioritize your relationship with God, then it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So to recap, some of the practical things we can do when faced with a change or needing to pivot: strong faith in God.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two is
a strong support system.
A strong support system. Number three
was the pros and cons list.
Pros and cons. Number 4
was the due diligence.
That's right. And
Number
research.
5 was the planning.
And the planning.
Make the plan.
5 things.
Make the plan and then just follow it. Oh,
Execute.
and then I guess number 6, like which we just finished talking about, was make sure you process those feelings.
Yeah.
Either before, during, or after.
Yeah, definitely don't bottle those up and keep those stored. Not a good idea. Definitely process your feelings.
And I think especially if your decision impacts multiple people and then they want to process their feelings with you, then you have to be mindful of that. Like, for example, when I was moving from Philly to Minneapolis, my parents were distressed, like, oh, will we ever see him? He's moving far away. Oh, he's getting married. There's like a lot of changes going on in my life all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you just have to like figure out how to reassure them. And it was the same thing when like we were moving from Minneapolis to DC. I had to reassure like my wife to make sure that her feelings were processed because we obviously process feelings very differently.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think that kind of adds another layer of complexity to the equation when you have other people to consider as well.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think those 5 steps still apply.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much, Bishoy, for joining me today. Such a great conversation and some really good practical tools to use in making big decisions. Really appreciate you joining me today.
It's my pleasure. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, no, I can I can tell you've moved a lot. You've had a lot of a lot of changes in life. It makes sense. You seem to be like you're like an expert on the subject for sure.
Yeah, and so I hope that for all the listeners, like I hope that you feel more empowered, be able to go through a change or some sort of pivot like with a little bit more confidence and just like reassurance that like God's got your back and that things are gonna be okay.
Absolutely, brother. Yeah, I hope the same thing. And thank you all for listening to episode 2 of What's Next. Please do subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our next episode. And follow me on social media to keep up to date on future episodes and future guests. We'll see you guys in the next one. God bless.